I never thought a few words could make the ground disappear beneath me. But that's exactly what happened one rainy evening. My wife, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world, looked me straight in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. "You're not enough." Those words didn't just sting, they shattered something deep inside me. I sat there, trying to understand, replaying every conversation, every small mistake I'd made, every time I thought I was doing something right. But no matter how hard I tried, the phrase kept echoing in my head. Not enough. I kept asking myself, not enough for what? Not enough for love? For attention? For her happiness? My name is Ethan. I'm 32, work in a job that's stable but far from exciting, and I've always thought I gave everything I could to the people I cared about. I never expected my marriage, the one place I believed would be a safe harbor, to suddenly feel like a storm I couldn't survive. And yet, there I was, drowning in confusion and heartbreak, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. It's strange how life has a way of showing you what you truly need when you least expect it. After that night, I started noticing things I'd never really paid attention to. The way my wife's best friend, Claire, would laugh at my terrible jokes, the way she always seemed to notice when I was upset, and the small gestures that, at the time, I had brushed off as casual kindness. I never thought much of it. After all, she was her friend, and I was married. But something about the way she looked at me that week after my wife's words lingered. There was concern, yes, but there was also something warmer, something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in months. I tried to push it away, tried to tell myself I was imagining things. But deep down, a tiny spark of curiosity started to grow. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I felt. Maybe there was a chance to understand what love could actually feel like, beyond the doubts and criticism that had been weighing me down. And then one evening, out of nowhere, Claire did something that completely flipped my world. Something I never expected from a friend of my wife. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be enough. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge every rule I'd ever followed, every line I'd ever drawn. And it all started with a choice that could either destroy everything I had left or finally show me what I had been missing all along. Before that night, I thought I knew my marriage inside and out. My wife, Melissa, and I had been together for almost a decade, and on the surface, everything looked normal: comfortable dinners, shared routines, quiet weekends at home. But lately, there had been cracks I'd tried to ignore. She was distant, distracted, sometimes impatient over things I didn't even realize mattered. I chalked it up to stress or work, telling myself that every relationship goes through rough patches. Melissa's best friend, Claire, was always around too. She had been in our lives longer than I cared to admit. Funny, easygoing, the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. I liked her, in a friendly way, and I knew she genuinely cared about both of us. But I also always felt a little wary. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just the subtle way she seemed to notice things I didn't notice about myself, things my wife seemed to take for granted. We all worked and socialized together in overlapping circles, so I was used to Claire being around. But after Melissa's words, after being told I wasn't enough, suddenly every glance, every small gesture from her felt different. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, or if the tension in my marriage had shifted something in the way I perceived the people around me. I remember sitting on the couch one night, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, trying to distract myself from the spiral of self-doubt Melissa had left me in. Claire came in just as I was about to give up on understanding my own thoughts. She didn't say much at first, just handed me a cup of coffee like she'd done 100 times before. But that evening, there was something in her eyes I couldn't ignore. Concern? Sympathy? Something softer, almost like she could see through the walls I'd built around myself. We started talking, really talking, about things I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Melissa. About the pressure I felt to be perfect, about the fear that I wasn't living up to expectations I didn't even fully understand. Claire listened without judgment. She didn't offer advice right away. She just let me speak, and for the first time in months, I felt a tiny spark of relief. But it wasn't simple. I knew the line between comfort and something more dangerous was thin, and I could feel myself teetering on it. I tried to tell myself it was harmless, just a friend being kind. Yet deep down, A part of me couldn't ignore the electricity that passed between us, subtle but undeniable. And then, one night, the situation escalated in a way I wasn't prepared for. A single choice, a single action, would set off a chain of events that I couldn't stop, and it would force me to confront questions I'd been avoiding for months. What does it really mean to feel loved? Can you find it where you least expect it? And am I willing to risk everything to discover it? After that night, everything felt different, but nothing had officially changed. Melissa still acted like nothing was wrong, going about her routines as if her words hadn't cut me so deeply. And yet, her judgment hung over me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I found myself constantly second-guessing everything I did, my words, my actions, even the way I smiled. Not enough. Those two words echoed every time I looked in the mirror. Meanwhile, Claire was there, more present than ever, but in a way that made everything more complicated. She was subtle, almost painfully careful, in how she interacted with me. Small touches on my arm when she laughed, lingering looks when she asked if I was okay, quiet encouragement when I doubted myself. It was confusing. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just projecting my own loneliness and heartbreak onto someone who cared. But feelings aren't logical. And the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how little I felt seen by Melissa anymore. How little warmth existed in the home I had built, supposedly filled with love. With Claire, it wasn't just comfort, it was understanding. She seemed to know what I needed before I even said it. And that terrified me, because I knew it was dangerous. Dangerous because it made me question everything about my marriage, my loyalty, and even myself. I tried to bury it, but then came the moments I couldn't ignore. A hand brushing against mine while reaching for something, a whispered joke that made my chest tighten, a look that lingered far too long to be casual. And each time, I felt that pull, equal parts fear and longing. Part of me knew I shouldn't be feeling this way. Part of me also realized I couldn't stop. Then came the evening that changed everything. Melissa had gone out with friends, and Claire had stayed behind to check on me, she said. I didn't know if I was relieved or anxious, but I welcomed the company nonetheless. We talked for hours, like we had before, and I felt that tiny spark inside me growing into a flame I could no longer ignore. And then, in a moment that seemed to hang still in the air, she did something that made my heart stop. Something small, almost accidental, but impossible to dismiss. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a weight that neither of us could deny. In that instant, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my desires, and even my sense of self, suddenly felt uncertain. I didn't know it yet, but that night would set off a chain reaction that would test every limit, every loyalty, and every moral line I'd ever drawn. And it all began with a single, quiet choice that neither of us would be able to take back. The days after that night were a blur of quiet tension and stolen moments. Every interaction with Melissa felt sharper, colder, as if her words, not enough, had transformed her into a stranger in our own home. I tried to act normal, to maintain the routine of a marriage that was slowly slipping through my fingers, but it was impossible. Every glance, every passing word, reminded me of the widening gap between us. Meanwhile, Claire became a constant presence I couldn't ignore. She wasn't overt, never crossing lines that could be easily condemned, but the way she lingered just a moment longer than necessary, the subtle concern in her voice when she asked if I was tired, the way she somehow seemed to understand my silences, it was intoxicating. I knew it was dangerous, but a part of me craved it, needed it. One evening, Melissa mentioned going out of town for the weekend with friends. I should have felt relief, or maybe even freedom, but instead, a gnawing unease settled in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen that would change everything. And when Claire offered to keep me company while Melissa was gone, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. I told myself it was just friendship, but my heart didn't believe me. The weekend began slowly, almost innocuously. We cooked together, shared stories, laughed at things that had once felt trivial, and I felt warmth and understanding that I hadn't experienced in months. Every second with her made the distance between me and Melissa feel wider, sharper, almost unbridgeable. And yet, I also felt a sense of guilt gnawing at me, a fear that one wrong step could destroy everything I had left. And then it happened. A single touch, a lingering glance, a whispered word that shouldn't have held so much weight, but it did. The air between us changed, charged with tension so thick I could almost taste it. My heart pounded in my chest as if warning me, as if shouting that this moment could decide the rest of my life. I wanted to stop it. I tried to rationalize, to remind myself that Melissa was my wife, that this was dangerous territory, that nothing good could come from crossing this invisible line. But every part of me, the part that had felt invisible, unworthy, and unloved, ached to lean in, to see if what I was feeling could actually exist. And just as I was about to speak, to act, or even retreat, Claire did something that left me frozen. Something that wasn't reckless or obvious, but impossible to ignore. It was a gesture so small, so quiet, yet it carried an entire world of unspoken meaning. And in that moment, I realized that nothing would ever feel the same again. I didn't know it yet, but the choice I made, or didn't make, that night would set off a chain of events that neither Melissa, Claire, nor I could control. And the revelation waiting just around the corner was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. Just when I thought the weekend had pushed me to the edge, something happened that I never saw coming. I was alone in the living room, trying to process the tension between Claire and me, when my phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. "We need to talk. Now." My chest tightened. I thought she was calling to confront me, to scold me, to finally let me feel the consequences of my growing attachment to Claire. I rushed to the cafe we'd agreed to meet at, heart pounding, palms sweaty. When I arrived, Melissa wasn't alone. Claire was sitting across from her, smiling, but not in the way I expected. There was an intensity in her eyes, a confidence I hadn't seen before. And then Melissa leaned in, her voice low, almost teasing. "You didn't see it, did you?" Before I could respond, Claire spoke. "Some things are easier to understand when you see them for yourself." I froze. The weight of their words hit me like a punch. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew, the tension, the gestures, even my own feelings, felt like part of a plan I didn't understand. And in that instant, I realized I was caught in something far bigger, far more dangerous than just a failing marriage or forbidden attraction. Everything was about to change, and I had no idea how deep this went. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Melissa and Claire sat across from me, their calm, controlled expressions mocking the chaos raging in my chest. I opened my mouth, trying to demand answers, but nothing came out. Melissa spoke first, her voice steady but cutting. "You've been feeling invisible, Ethan. That's why Claire's presence mattered so much to you. But you didn't just feel it. You acted on it in your head before anything happened." I swallowed hard. I didn't. "Doesn't matter," Claire interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "Sometimes, what we feel is enough to change everything, whether or not we act. But what we don't see can hurt even more." I shook my head, heart hammering, trying to process the words. The tension between them wasn't just real, it was intentional. I realized then that every moment, every subtle glance, every word had been a careful push to make me confront something I'd been avoiding. Myself. Melissa leaned closer. "Ethan, you've been hiding from me, from us, from yourself. Everything with Claire, it wasn't just about her. It was about you finally seeing what you need." I felt anger, relief, and confusion crash into me at once. "So this was some lesson? Some test?" I stammered. Claire shook her head, smiling softly. "Not a test. An awakening." And in that instant, I understood what I thought was betrayal, temptation, and lust was actually a mirror held up to me. The real conflict wasn't about Melissa or Claire. It was about me, about learning to see my worth, about realizing that love isn't about proving yourself to someone else. It's about being seen, truly seen. Then, just as I felt the tension ease, Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. The message she read made her pale. I looked over her shoulder, heart stopping. It was from Claire. "Are you ready for the real truth?" Everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and my own life was about to shatter again. And this time, there might be no going back. I didn't know whether to feel terrified or strangely alive as I stared at the message on Melissa's phone. The words, "Are you ready for the real truth?" weren't threatening, they were challenging. They demanded honesty, clarity, and courage. And for the first time in weeks, I realized that maybe I had been running from all three. Melissa looked at me, her eyes softer now, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since the start of this chaos. "Ethan, everything that happened this weekend, It wasn't just a coincidence. Claire and I, we wanted you to see something important, that you aren't defined by anyone's judgment. That being enough isn't about meeting someone else's expectations. It's about knowing your own heart. Claire nodded, smiling gently. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were trying to remind you who you are and what love really feels like when it's genuine, honest, and mutual. It hit me like a wave. Every stolen glance, every moment of tension, every surge of longing, it hadn't been about betrayal. It had been about awakening me to myself, to the truth that I had been hiding, that I had been desperate for validation, searching for approval in the wrong places, and letting my insecurities define my reality. I exhaled, feeling the weight I hadn't realized I was carrying finally start to lift. Melissa reached out, taking my hand. I love you, Ethan. I always have. But we've both been blind to what we needed. Now it's time to see each other clearly. And Claire, she just smiled, a knowing warmth in her eyes that told me our connection wasn't meant to be romantic. It was a mirror, a guide, a spark that reminded me of my own worth. Over the next few days, I reflected on everything that had happened. The fear, the confusion, the forbidden tension. It had all led me to one undeniable truth. Love isn't about perfection. It's about seeing, being seen, and choosing to grow together, even when it's uncomfortable. Melissa and I began to rebuild, slowly, carefully. We talked more openly than we ever had before, shared fears, hopes, and truths we'd buried for years. And I realized that the moment of feeling not enough had been a gift in disguise. It pushed me to confront myself, to understand what I truly needed, and to finally embrace the kind of love that doesn't demand perfection. As for Claire, she remained a presence in my life, but in a different way, a reminder that guidance, compassion, and understanding can come from the most unexpected places. Sitting on our porch one evening, holding Melissa's hand, I smiled and felt something I hadn't in a long time: certainty. Not in perfection, not in approval, not in meeting someone else's expectations, but in the quiet, steady truth that I was, finally, enough. And in that moment, I understood that love, real love, isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about seeing, being seen, and choosing to stay, even when it's hard.